Thank you everyone for joining us for this evening's event. My name is Nick and I'm one of the events hosts here at Powell's Books in Portland, Oregon. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual events by visiting us on our website at powells.com. If you don't already do so, please follow us on our social media accounts of Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Tonight, we are thrilled to welcome James S. Okoye and Ann Leckie. James S. Okoye is the pen name of Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank. In addition to writing the novels and short stories of the Hugo Award-winning Expanse series, they wrote and produced the television series, the same name, among other works. The biggest science fiction series of the decade comes to an incredible conclusion in Leviathan Falls, the 9th and final novel in this Hugo Award-winning space opera series, The Expanse. As a nearly unimaginable forces prepare to annihilate all human life, Holden and a group of unlikely allies discover a last desperate chance to unite all of humanity with the promise of a vast galactic civilization free from wars, factions, lies, and secrets if they win. But the price of victory may be worse than the cost of defeat. We'll be joined. Yes. We'll also be joined in conversation tonight by Ann Leckie, author of Hugo, Nebula, and Arthur C. Clarke Award-winning novel Ancillary Justice. She has published short stories in Subterranean Magazine, Strange Horizons, The Realms of Fantasy, and her story Hesperia and the Glory was reprinted in Science Fiction, The Best of the Year 2007. So this evening's event will also include an audience Q&A. So please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to ask a question. As well as if someone typed a question you'd also like to know the answer to, please upvote that particular question by clicking the thumbs up button. So thank you all so much for purchasing Leviathan Falls and supporting James and Powell's. And if you want to check out other books by James and Ann, links to their works will be shared in the chat a couple of times tonight. All right, we're thrilled to have you all here and welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
I got to say, I'm a little uncomfortable them saying that we're the biggest sci-fi series of the last decade when we're in the same chat room with Ann.
Yeah, no, it's a little bit optimistic. But,
Did we
you
lose?
know, no, we got her.
Okay. So yeah, that feels a little weird to say when probably the most award-winning writer of space opera of the last decade is in the same room with us.
Well, she left, so that's all.
Yeah.
Of the,
oh, hey, as long as she's gone, now we can call ourselves great because she's not here to.
Now we're the absolute best.
We're the best in this room.
Hey, Ann.
Am I back?
You are back.
You appear to be back, which we were just comparing ourselves to you since you were away from the camera.
No one compares to me. No.
No, it's kind of where we got to, actually. So, hey, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you guys? 9 books. That's really huge. That must be a relief to finally have written the actual end.
You know, you can tell when we're talking to a writer because they're the ones who say, "Oh, you must be relieved." All the other people are saying, "You must be so sad to be at the end." It's like, the other people, the ones who are actually doing this, they know. Yeah, no, it's a relief.
Yeah, that's a big project. Did you? Do you guys have everything? You had everything outlined, all 9 books, when you started?
Kinda. I mean, we came up with the series. We came up with a very loose series outline while we were writing book 2. So we wrote book 1 and sent it to the publisher. Well, sent it to our agent, and just because Daniel's very smart, he said, "Hey, you know what we should do? Publishers like to buy things if they think they can buy more. So let's include a little 1-paragraph description of what book 2 would be and a 1-paragraph description of what book 3 would be." And of course, Orbit bought all 3. So then we had to get serious about outlining book 2 and 3. And while we were working on book 2, we said, let's go ahead and figure out what the rest of the series would be, and sort of came up with the loose outline from there.
So it was a
actually
loose outline.
We had two versions of the outline. We had one that was 12 books long and one that was 9 books long, and we figured that the one that had 12 books had this like really dull part in the middle, so we just didn't do those 3.
Yeah, we're big fans of Elmore Leonard, and I think he's the one who, I'm paraphrasing, said, figure out all the parts of your book that people skip and just don't write those. So
Yeah, skip the dull parts.
Yep.
Yeah. It was a good call.
He was very good at what he did.
Yeah. So, and I have to admit, I am not caught up with the books. So I'm not sure at all. I haven't read this one.
Totally
I haven't
legit.
gotten up to this one. And I know somebody in the chat was saying they didn't want spoilers.
We're not going to spoil the last book in this chat. Don't worry.
Yeah, it's one of, you get into this business because you love to read, right? And then you get into it and you don't have time to read.
Well, and I have a hard time too, because like I have a hard time reading the kind of stuff I'm working on. Feels like still being at work. So, I'm badly behind on my space opera. I've been reading a lot of crime novels and horror and stuff that I'm not actually, spending my day making.
Yeah. Well, and this has been a tough time to read, actually, because there's just so much going on. I think a lot of people just want to sit down and have an adventure, right? And not do anything too taxing. I know I've been reading, and I'm not a romance person, and I have been reading a whole bunch of historical romance.
Yep. No, that's escapism is there when you need some escape. I think that's that's only a kindness.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I know sometimes folks talk about great literature or just escapism, just a beach read, and I'm like, there's no just about it. That's being able to do that is a real talent, and it's really an important thing to have in the world, to have just an adventure that'll take you away for a while when things are tough.
Yeah, my escapist literature, probably weird, is horror. I read a ton of horror, and the people who can do that genre well, like the Stephen Kings and the Joe Hills of the world, they're insanely talented. That's not throwaway literature. Those people are really, really good at what they do.
Truth.
It's a little unfair.
Although I have to admit, horror isn't something that it's not one of my faves. I can only take sort of a very thin slice of horror. But I know a lot of folks who I know and love who horror is what they read. And like you said, now when they want to escape, they're going to read some horror because that's going to be what's going to do it for them.
Yep.
Well, terrible things are happening, but they're not happening
fancy
to me.
Dudes. Exactly.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, you all are fancy dudes with a TV show. That's okay. You all have a TV show. How awesome is that?
For it is absolutely amazing and awesome, and I will always be grateful to Ty for being the part of the team that went and did the 14 and 16-hour days in a cold of Toronto. Just being awesome, on my behalf, because that looked awful.
So were they filming in Canada?
Yeah, we filmed primarily in and around Toronto. We had
okay.
Yeah, we had about 80,000 square feet of stage space in various stages in Toronto, and then we didn't do a lot of location shooting, but when we did do location shooting, it was in the Toronto area. So.
And in winter. I mean, it was brutal.
Often in winter. Yeah. I was actually in Toronto shooting in the winter during the polar vortex. And when it was often getting down to like -40. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah. So does the show, they've finished filming the last season? Is that?
Yeah.
Or are they filming the last season right now?
The last season actually drops on the 10th. The first episode of season 6
Okay.
comes out in less than 2 weeks.
Okay, my husband will be glad to hear that because we always sit down and watch it when it starts coming out. He's like, "When's the next one coming? Are they done?" I'm like, "I don't think so."
We were
9
still
days.
working
That'll
on
be exciting.
we were still working on post up until just maybe a month ago. But yeah, that post production on our show takes a long time because obviously we have a very high count of visual effects shots and that kind of
I
stuff.
would
so-
imagine.
Did we lose Ann again?
So, does the show go all the way up? Sorry, does the show go all the way up to the end of this last book?
No.
No.
We've been doing close to, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, a book a season, and so the end of book 6 and the end of season 6 will be pretty much the same place.
Okay, all right, that makes sense.
Which actually works out pretty well. That those 3 boring books that I told you we cut out come right after book 6. So there's in the novels there's a time jump right after book 6 where those bad books were going to be. So it's kind of a natural off ramp, or at least pause point in the story. So
Yeah.
I think they worked out well.
There's 3 natural exits for the TV show from the books. We could have stopped after season 3. It would have been a pretty satisfying natural exit. We were stopping after season 6, at least for now. And then obviously stopping after after episode 9 or season 9, 9th book, whatever you want to say. So we had some breakpoints. We knew where the breakpoints were if we weren't going to get picked up, if we weren't going to make more episodes. We knew where we could stop.
And this is a good one.
So somebody in the audience is super curious about co-authoring. So how does co-authoring work? Are there problems, some difficulties? How does it work? How do you do that? I have to admit, I'm not sure how you do that.
Well, I've been in several kind of co-authorship projects. I did a novel called Hunter's Run with George R. R. Martin and Gardner Dozois. And I did some short stories with more than one writer. And the trick, I think, to a successful co-writing situation is work with Ty.
I guess that just means I'm easygoing. But the truth is, how we do it has evolved and changed almost with every book. The first book, we very strictly cut it in half by point of view. Not too long after that, we weren't doing that anymore. We were sort of dividing the book up by, we'd outline a chapter, and then at the end of the outline, one of us would say, "Oh, that sounds like something I'd like to write." And that person would write that chapter. So we started out dividing it by point of view character. We then moved on to dividing it by interest. Like, that sounds like a chapter I want to write. Then once the TV show started, and I was really heavily involved in the TV show side, then it became Daniel and I would outline together. He would do a first draft. He would send it to me. I would do a rewrite on it. He wound up doing a lot more of the first drafting of stuff because I was doing a lot of like script writing and script rewriting and producing in Toronto. So it has changed many times as we've done it, as we've moved forward through it.
So not a lot of disputes, I guess, or push and pull over somebody wanting one thing and it going a different way, or how does that work when you have a disagreement about how things feel or where things are going?
That almost never happened. We had a lot of time at the beginning of the process kind of talking about what the project was, aesthetically, what the intention was behind it. And so we had a pretty good pole star going in. There were the only times I can remember us having any conflict at all were times like there was one character I had a really hard time killing because I just liked her so much, and Ty had to, kind of stiffen my resolve to kill her because it was the right thing. But nothing substantive, I don't think, ever really.
I've mentioned this other places, but the one issue that arises between us is that Daniel is a person who deals with anxiety and really worries about things like deadlines. And I am a notorious procrastinator. And so occasionally Daniel would have to prod me with a sharp stick and go, we actually have to get this done. We have to get this done. Hurry up and get it done. So there have been times where my procrastination pushed him to the point where he got a little grouchy. But I freely admit that is 100% my fault. None of that is his fault. So I take full credit for that. But if the fact that he's there poking me with a stick is the reason anything gets done.
So has your process changed at all from the beginning? I mean, you said you didn't, it sounds like you didn't have a big change in how you were operating from when you started. Somebody wanted to know how your process might have changed. And is there something that co-authoring like saved you from? Is there something that like if you'd been by yourself, you would have had a rougher time or made a particular mistake, or was it that wasn't an issue?
I mean, I would say that. Oh, go ahead, Daniel.
No, you take it. You take it.
I was just going to say that we were fortunate in that Daniel and I, our interests when it comes to writing, while they have a large overlap, they also have some areas that fall outside of the overlap. And so because of that, my areas of interest sort of prop up the things he's not as interested in, and his areas of interest sort of prop up the things I'm not interested in. I mean, just as an example, I find long passages of physical description very tedious to read. So like if you have a 3-page description of what the feast looks like and what everybody's wearing and what all the food dishes are, I just tune out. My eyes just glaze over. And because of that, I tend not to be as rigorous in including physical description in my text. And so Daniel will have to poke me, and when he's doing an editorial pass or rewrite on my stuff, he adds in more physical description. And on the other hand, Daniel's less, or at least started out less sort of focused on what physical action looks like and feels like. And that is something that I'm very much more focused on. So I'd add in all the action scenes in his chapters. He'd add in all the physical description in mine. And you wind up with a chapter that has all of the things that it needs because we kind of, that's the Venn diagram of our interests.
And the things that actually, the thing that's interesting to me is the things that didn't change in the process. We always outlined it together. We always had one guy do the first draft of a chapter and the other guy do the rewrite. We always went through the whole manuscript top to bottom separately at the end. Those are the things I think that really maintained all the way through it. The details of who was writing, which chapters or, where we were when we were doing it were the things that were the most flexible. And we also both got better. I mean, at this point, Ty can write a perfectly cromulent descriptive passage. I can do a passable action scene. We both wound up learning a lot from the other guy, but it wound up being very much in Jimmy Corey's voice. So we got to where we could kind of both. I wound up with a little Ty homunculus in the back of my head. Ty wound up with a little Daniel homunculus in the back of his head. We could kind of know what the other guy was going to critique before we even sent it to him. And that's just, years of working together more than anything else.
It's funny because that is absolutely true. There's a little Daniel in the back of my head when I'm writing something, sitting back there saying, remember, tell them what the room looks like. They're not doing all of this action in a formless void. But both Daniel and I also have a little Narain Shankar homunculus in our head, because we've now worked 6 years writing scripts with our showrunner on the show, Narain Shankar. And so I also now have a little Narain in my head, like that's giving me advice on what to write. And he sometimes shows up even when I'm writing prose, which is weird because he's my script Yoda, not my prose Yoda, but still his opinion on whether or not my dialogue is good enough definitely shows up sometimes.
Yeah. Where did the individual characters come from? Like, where did Holden come from? Where did Naomi come from? Where did they? I know this started as a game, right?
Yeah.
As basically an RPG kind of a thing. So were those characters from the game, or did they come from someplace else?
Well, so it depends. Much of the initial cast of the book did in fact come from some of the games. Characters like Holden, Naomi, Shed, Detective Miller, those people were sort of play tested in the game world years before Daniel and I ever talked about writing a book. But once we got past the first book, basically none of the characters came from the game from then on. It was with one exception, Bobby. Bobby was a character in one of the games. We just didn't include her in the first book. And when we were doing the second book, I was like, hey, this seems like a good time to bring Bobby in. So Bobby was a character from the games.
So the things that happened in the games, are they things that happened in the book, or things that happened in the book, but you sort of customized them for what you wanted to do?
Very distant.
Or how does that work?
They're very distant cousins. Some of the large plot moves that happen in the book are also the large plot moves that were happening in the game, but almost at a scene level, almost nothing is the same. Because if you record your role-playing session and transcribe it, it's a terrible book. So you can't do that.
Yeah. That's why when I'm sort of looking at the questions and sort of combining some of them, and I thought that's a really interesting, like, how would that work without being, because when you're playing, it's great. You're having the best time. And if you sat down to make a story out of it, it would just be ridiculous.
It would be ridiculous.
But you made really compelling characters and story out of your game.
We lifted the parts that were liftable, and we filled in the parts that weren't. Yeah.
Which often I feel like that's kind of the trick. Like a lot of the time, people talk about writing, oh, it's self-indulgent, but I feel like you always want to indulge yourself, right? Because if you're not having a good time, how's anybody else? But you also kind of have to separate out the parts that are obviously like the thing that is really cool for you, but has to be crafted into something better, or really, doesn't look right. And keep the things that are going to appeal to other people. And that's kind of tricky. That's hard to do. Well,
and we're all puppeteers. And what we're trying to do is make sure the strings are painted black so the audience can't see them.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do. And sometimes you don't do it right. Sometimes a string is visible and it knocks the reader out of the experience. So you try to avoid that as much as possible.
Well, and it's hard. I think different readers have different visual spectra, if we're going to carry that along. And so you could get 80% of readers not seeing your strings, and you could get the one reader who sees infrared and is like, look at all these horrible strings. And it's not because you did anything wrong. It's just because that percentage of your audience sees into the infrared and you can't deal with that. Yeah.
You can't make everybody happy. You can't try. There's no percentage in that.
No, you might as well make yourself happy.
Yep. And no matter how much praise you get, this is why I don't read reviews. The reason I don't read reviews is because the reviews that overpraise you are bad for you, and they are just as bad for you as the ones that hate you. Because the truth is always somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And so no matter how good you get, no matter how famous you get, no matter how many awards you win or how many books you sell, there are going to be a people on the internet who hate your guts, hate every word you've ever typed,
Oh,
think you are
yes.
the worst thing that has ever happened to literature, and they will be very vocal about it. And I mean, I always joke about this. It's like judging at the Olympics. I throw away the Russian vote. I throw away the American vote. I just go by what the French and the Spanish think, and the Greeks, because they're in the middle. They're probably the most reasonable, right? You get the two extreme votes, and you just get rid of those, and kind of pay attention to the middle of the curve.
Yeah, not reading reviews is probably pretty smart.
They're very bad for you. As a writer, reading reviews is very bad for you. It does things to your brain.
It's also really hard not to. But you also get. Sorry.
I find that I read it. I read until I get to the first really negative review. And I think, okay, that's what they're going to object to. Okay, I can live with that. We're moving on now, and then I'm good.
Yeah, I usually read a few when something first comes out, and I'm like, oh, all right, this is how this is going to go, and then I don't have to read anymore. But it's hard. You get so little external validation as a writer. You're doing everything in your little office, or maybe in your table at the coffee shop, or the bathroom with the kids outside the door, whatever it is that you can do, and nobody can really see what you're doing. And then you don't hear. The book comes out, and nothing, you don't hear anything, and it's hard not to go look at those reviews, because you're like, I want somebody to tell me, did I succeed or fail? And of course the reviews aren't going to tell you that.
Well, they're going to tell you both. They're going to tell you succeeded. They're going to tell you that you failed. They're going to tell you just all kinds of stuff, and none of it's actually going to help you write the next time.
Yeah, and the thing I learned very quickly writing a long series, and I'm sure you've written series yourself, I'm sure you've seen some of this. Every book in the series is both the very best book in the series and a triumphant return to form, and it's the worst thing you've ever written, and it's a complete betrayal of the series before that. Every single book gets both of those things. So you have to quickly realize it's all kind of noise, and you got to be able to separate yourself from the noise a little bit. Where I find what Daniel and I, what we do is we have beta readers. We have writers that we have great respect for. We think their opinion is very balanced, and we send them our stuff and wait to see what they say. And that's why there's a beta reader we thank in every book, Carrie Vaughn. We thank her in every book. She's read every book early, and she's very balanced. She when we fuck something up, she's quick to tell us. And so I feel like I get my validation in other places. I don't need to go find somebody angry at me on the internet to feel good about myself.
So somebody, a person in the audience, is interested in you're writing about the future of the solar system. Were you thinking about what you thought a plausible future was for the solar system? Was that something that you were thinking of possible futures when you put that setting together?
No, I was writing Stars My Destination fanfic is what I was doing.
All right.
I'm a huge fan of Stars My Destination, a huge Alfred Bester fan. I finished Stars My Destination and said, I want 1 million more books in that setting. And there weren't any, so I had to write them.
That's fair. I think it can be kind of hard. Sorry.
No, please, go ahead.
I was going to say it can be kind of hard. Science fiction is sort of expected to be predicting the future and looking to the future, but I don't think any writer has ever gotten a whole lot of things right. A lot of folks have gotten some sort of stopped clock is right twice a day things right, but I guess I'm not sure what the point would be of actually trying to predict what would be plausible in the future, but I know different people have different attitude towards that.
Yeah, I mean, the reality, Daniel and I've talked about this much time, the reality is if you're trying to write your sci-fi to predict the future, you're going to fail because everyone before you has failed. We're as science fiction writers are terrible at predicting what's going to happen in the future. My favorite example of that is one of my good friends, brilliant writer named Walter John Williams. He wrote a bunch of cyberpunk in the 80s, and he has this far future cyberpunk novel where one of the key plot points is the hackers have to find a payphone so that they can hack back into the matrix and finish doing the thing that they're doing. He just missed cell phones. He just missed it. Like, he missed cell phones, he missed Wi-Fi, and guess what? Everybody else did too. The whole cyberpunk revolution, they just missed that stuff. We're just bad at it. As sci-fi writers, we're bad at predicting what's going to come next.
But we're not bad at inspiring people. I mean, that's the thing that I think is most interesting. Yeah, the actual details and minutia, I think, are less interesting than, you know, projecting a future where, you know, there's a reason that the flip phones look like communicators from the old Star Trek. That's just true. I think that when you have someone like Ursula Le Guin talking about ways that humans can organize, ways that people can organize, she's imagining a possible future for us. And I think that kind of thing can make sociologists, can make engineers, can make ways to imagine things kind of first before you go imagine them in the real world. And blacked out for a second. I think she's back.
Hey, you're muted, Anne. You're muted right now.
You were talking. There we go. I believe
There
I
we go.
muted myself. There we go.
You're good.
So you were talking about the flip phone, I presume, and how it was inspired by Star Trek.
That and the idea of you know, science fiction being a first imagining of possible futures.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we're losing. Oh, there we go.
You know, it's hard to imagine something. Am I still here?
You're there.
You're here.
You're there. You froze for a
Okay.
second, but you're good.
It's
now.
hard to, okay. All right. It's hard to know a goal to move toward until you can imagine what you want to move toward. And I think you're absolutely right that science fiction does a lot of that, which is, what if we could have a communicator? What if we could have warp drive? What if we could have, you know, whatever these various things are? And that's why, unfortunately, poor Walter, we don't have payphones anymore.
But also, it's also a way to imagine, you know, what would it be like if you used feminine pronouns as a generic instead of masculine. That's you do this too. I mean, it's thought experiments on ways that we could be.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I don't remember who said this, and I think a bunch of people have said it by now, which is that science fiction is always about the present. It's always about the time that it's being written. But it's partly about the time that it's being written, thinking about how things could be different.
Well, and it's also about the time it's being read. I mean, the stuff that Jules Verne did, he was not at all talking about us, and yet we still read him now. The stuff
That's
that
very
was,
true.
it's an ongoing conversation between generations, and that's kind of what makes it fun.
Here we go. So somebody in the audience wants to know what the latest book that we read that we loved. All three of us.
Mm. The one that this wasn't the most recent one that I read, but it's one that keeps kind of coming back to me. In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I don't know if you've read that one, but it was kind of amazing.
I haven't read that.
You might try picking up a copy. It's worth the price of admission. It's not at all what I expected it to be. And I probably read that toward the beginning of the pandemic, and I keep thinking about it. I keep coming back to it. It's a short book. It's brilliantly written. It's a bunch of different. It's an essay about kind of the things that we don't talk, the stories we don't tell. It's a retelling of one particular relationship. It's just proof that Carmen Maria Machado is a better writer than all of us. It's just awesome.
I'll have to definitely check that out. What about you, Ty? What have you loved recently that you've read?
I don't know if this counts as a book, but my wife, as a gift, bought me the entire Sandman collection, like every Sandman book. And I had read a bunch of Sandman years ago when they were first being printed individually as comics. But this is my first time getting to read the whole thing straight through as one sort of gigantic novel. And it's just once again impressing upon me that Neil Gaiman is smarter than I am and a much better writer, because it's brilliant. I mean, the art is great and all that, but Gaiman's writing is brilliant. So I've been reading a lot of Sandman lately.
Huh. I think the most recent thing that I've really enjoyed is Catherine Addison's Witness for the Dead, which is a sort of a sequel to The Goblin Emperor, which I highly recommend both of them. They're both fabulous. They're both kind of low key, but that was exactly kind of what I needed to read. And they're just excellent. I recommend them both. And I think there's another one coming out next year, and I'm really wanting to get a hold of somebody at Tor to send me a copy.
I'm sure you could bully somebody at Tor.
It's nice having friends in the industry, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I contact Ellen at Orbit and like, can I have the Murderbot thing that's coming out next year? And next thing I know, there it is.
Yep.
I don't do that as much as I probably should. I never bully the publisher, and I probably should, to get free stuff.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of time, though. I mean, at this point, I did the math, and if I read like a book a week from now on, I'm gonna need to die in my 90s. It's just so much. It's just we're in an age of plenty and surplus when it comes to these things.
Oh, there's some amazing writers out there. There's so much fabulous stuff coming out. It's really incredible. And people keep sending me books in the hope that I will read them and then publicly say, this is a fabulous book. And I feel kind of bad because they just keep stacking up. And someday I will read them, maybe years after they've come out, not in time to say anything about it, right?
I know.
But
I feel really bad.
I appreciate all the books.
Well, I feel really bad because somebody who I really like, that I'm very friendly with, had their agent send me a book, or not their agent, their publisher send me a book to potentially blurb. And unfortunately, that book arrived right in the middle of the most hectic time in my house renovation. And it seemed like my father was about to die of a series of strokes. So there was a lot of family stuff being dealt with. And so I started reading it. I got about a third of the way into it, and then life happened, and I missed the deadline for the blurb. And I feel terrible. Like, they sent me the book, and I said I would read it, and I said I would blurb it if I liked it. And I'm sure that person now thinks I hated their book, but I totally didn't. I just, I got blocked by life and didn't get to finish it. And once I was ready to get back to it, because our house is under renovation, so we're constantly moving everything from room to room. I lost it. It got moved from one room to another and vanished. And so by the time I was ready to get back into it, I don't know where it is now. So I've read a third of this book. It's a great third. I can highly recommend it, the first third of this book, but until we finally unpack everything, I won't get to read the last 2/3. So I couldn't blurb it. I felt terrible about that.
Yep.
Yeah, I always have to tell people right up front, please send me the book because they'll ask, but I can't promise that I'll read it anywhere at the time that you need it. And yeah, I have books by friends that I have never gotten to yet.
You gotta, especially when you're kind of in the churn of this, you gotta be willing to forgive people for not reading your books. It's you wouldn't have a lot of friends in the industry if you required it. I was talking to our agent in Hollywood yesterday about a guy, very famous filmmaker. You would recognize the name, who his agent didn't come to the premiere and he fired the agency the next day. It's like that's a level of narcissism I don't think I could maintain.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, on the other hand, our Hollywood agent always comes to our premieres, so apparently he took a lesson from that.
What? No, he's not. He's not coming to the thing for season 6 because they're not inviting representatives because of COVID.
Let's fire him then.
Yeah.
Well, no, he was. This was in the context of him making sure we wouldn't. He was asking to make sure we wouldn't fire him if he didn't show up.
Well, he maybe he could be my date.
My gosh.
Yeah, it's a strange industry. We're in a couple of strange industries now.
It's any industry that is driven entirely by ego and insecurity is it's going to be a tricky place to navigate. And
that's publishing in Hollywood.
Yep.
It's probably semiconductor manufacturing too. I mean, we're not special.
Did we lose Ann? Oh, she's back. Okay.
Am I still a little lag there?
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
You had a
got
little
frozen for a second.
Whenever that happens, we just start.
I'm having a bad internet night. I'm not sure what the.
It happens to the best of us.
Good. Because you all freeze up, I think, when that happens on my end, and I just think I'm going to sit here and smile. It'll be okay. Working with Hollywood, I think, is probably very different from working with publishers. You'd think they might be kind of similar, but they're not. They're very different cultures, I think. But it must be amazing fun. That just seems like it must be the most incredible thing to be involved with actual TV.
It actually makes it really hard to watch TV. Mostly
Does
what
it really?
does is it educates you to what all of the flaws are. I think Ty and I both have developed a really sophisticated ear for bad ADR and dubbing, where we're watching someone else's show and we go, "Oh, that was a clinker." Oh, or watching how something was edited together and thinking, "They're cutting around that guy. He must really suck because they're really cutting around that guy. We're seeing a lot of the back of his head."
Well, and the thing I noticed recently watching something that was actually quite a successful show, so Jeremy Benning is the cinematographer on our show, and early on, because I wanted to know how everything worked in season 1 and I knew nothing, I actually just sat in his tent with him, because the cinematographer's tent is the center of the production. Everybody comes to him. He's the most important piece that everybody connects to. And so I sat in his tent, and I would sit behind him as he was watching his camera monitors, and he was seeing all the things that were wrong, and he was calling the various people to fix them. And I think I sat in his tent too long, because I was watching a show just a week ago, and I'm like, dude, you left a camera shadow in. Did nobody see that? Like, I'm watching and they're doing like a big tracking shot, and I'm watching the camera shadow move across the wall behind the character. And I'm like, how did nobody see that? There's a camera shadow right there. Move the light. And so now this very intense emotional scene in this TV show is ruined for me, because I see the camera shadow on the wall. The DP should have spotted that. They should have moved the light. So yes, it has made it much harder to enjoy TV.
There's a joke that most of our lives are finding things that we love and then educating ourselves about them to the point that we can't enjoy them anymore.
Yeah.
But books are like that too. I mean, I look at the, having written a bunch of books, having engaged fully with the kind of prose, I go back to the books that I really loved when I was a teenager, and they're unreadable. They're like genuinely bad, but I loved them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know exactly. Yeah. Some things have held up, but it's hard looking at how fiction is put together. For instance, it's hard not to see the scaffolding when you go back.
Yep.
It's tough.
But the scaffolding for sure, but also at least in prose, the changes in how we view certain social institutions. I read books I loved from the 70s, and the gender politics make me cringe through the whole thing. There's a lot of that kind of stuff, and you have to read it understanding that it was a different time, and there was different ways of approaching those issues. But you can't help but read it from the perspective of somebody who who has, I would hope, a more evolved version of how those things should work. And so that's just a social thing. But when you get to what Daniel and you were talking about with the scaffolding, like now you get to a craft level and you understand writing craft better, and you're reading going, oh man, that was a terrible line of dialogue. Why did you leave that in there? That kind of stuff really starts to bump you out of the story.
Yeah, camera shadows. They're camera shadows.
They're just more camera shadows. I assume when you get quiet, you're reading through the questions in the Q&A thing.
I'm either doing that or you've frozen up for me, and I'm not sure if I'm still online or not. Somebody and a number of people are interested in this. Wanted to know if you could talk about the development of the Belter dialect, the Belter language.
Which version? The book version or the TV version?
How did you make those specific choices? Which languages to pull which words from? This person doesn't specify. So are they different? Oh, and a specific part is, was there some reason that Chinese wasn't included? I have a guess as to why Chinese wouldn't have been included, but I'll let you answer that one.
Chinese is included. So if you're talking about the TV version, the gentleman, the linguist who developed TV Belter, a guy named Nick Farmer, fluently speaks 30 languages, one of which is Chinese. And he took influences from all of those 30 languages in creating the patois, and modified all of it. So nothing is like, if you speak Chinese, you're not going to recognize clearly Chinese words in the patois, because it'll be some variation, some alternate version, some modified version. And that's true of all of the languages that he used. He used bits from 30 languages, but he tweaked them, he shifted them, he created a thing that was sort of its own new thing. And then we had a dialect coach work with Nick, developing what the various accents would be that people who spoke that language might have. And the dialect coach would then work with the actors in helping to hone their specific accent. So Chinese is in there. It's just not, it's not there more than anything else is. It's part of the sort of muddled mix.
The book version, on the other hand, really leaned into the idea of muddled mix, but without the expertise of actually being linguists. It was just, we grabbed whatever happened to be on the shelf at the moment and mashed it together.
And it tends, I was going to say, it tends to be a little Spanish heavy, because Daniel and I are both most familiar with Spanish. So our book patois falls back a lot on sort of Spanish idiom and phrasing.
And Spanish-like objects that are not at all actually Spanish. The idea in the books was really much more to give the reader a sense of being excluded from this culture than any kind of rigorous linguistic anything. It was a tool for storytelling, not a tool for a basic linguistics class included in our science fiction.
Yep.
Yeah, I would have guessed that Chinese wouldn't have been included because very possibly you didn't know enough Chinese, and it's better not to. I wouldn't include Chinese in something that I've written, not because I don't think it belongs there, but because if I did, I would definitely mess it up bad. I would have to get like a co-author.
We mess things up terribly.
We mess things up constantly.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. Can't let that stop you.
I spent multiple years working for a Chinese company and spending every day with nothing but Chinese people. And I know enough to say hello, say goodbye, order water, and cuss. That's what I can do. I could always tell when they were cussing at me because I know all the Chinese cuss words. But other than saying hello and asking for some water, I'm kind of out of my depth when it comes to Chinese.
Yeah, I know that we put in some Hungarian, which we are not good at, and apparently biffed it badly. But
but the thing is, though, and this is my answer to the people who go, well, that's not how Hungarians would say it, is these are not Hungarian people. They stole some words from Hungarian, repurposed them for their patois. That's not supposed to be dictionary perfect Hungarian. You know, that's the, you know, everybody who speaks a language that gets used in the patois, they want everything to be this weird mix except the language that they know they want it to be dictionary perfect. And my answer is none of it is dictionary perfect. It's all a mess.
So we made a mess. We called it Belter. And then we had a linguist come in who actually knew what he was doing, and he did a great job for the show.
And he did do a great job for the show. That was really excellent.
I mean, 30 languages, that's impressive.
I seriously admire the sort of conlang people who like put languages together and, you know, spend all this time. It's really incredible. And I could never do it in a million years.
It's not my skill set. I do other stuff, but
and Nick's mother, Ann, I don't know if she still does, but when I knew her, she worked at Google, and what she was doing was teaching computers to speak languages. She's also a linguist, but she's a linguist with a more computer programming background. And so that was her job over at Google, was teaching the computers to think in different languages. So it's a very smart family filled with linguists.
So what kinds of things, I'm looking at the questions at this point, what kinds of things had to change for the show? What kinds of changes had to be made for the show? I know some of it you said 6 was a good off-ramp, but I know some changes got made to fit things into the show. What kinds, is there like a trend in the kinds of things that had to change, or what were there interesting reasons behind some of the changes, or?
A lot of it was.
Go ahead,
you.
No, go ahead, man.
You. All right. A lot of it was just trying to condense. A lot of it was trying to take something that was, you know, a novel is, you know, hundreds of pages long and takes hours and hours and hours to read. Even getting it down to just a season, that there's a lot of stuff in there that's just works well in prose, but it's too much and too confusing if you film it. So, you know, the classic example of that's the character Drummer, who in the show is probably 5 or 6 different characters from the books, all kind of glommed together into this new person. Which, you know, then you only have one actor you need to know. You have one storyline that she's running through, and I think it worked out really well. Instead of having all 5 of the people introduced and cast and hired and remembering who they are, and it was just much more graceful for that medium.
Yeah, adaptation is compression. You're just taking a thing and you're compressing it down to its essence so that you can get the same ideas, the same story in the least amount of time to tell that story. That's what it always is. And that's why books work better as TV shows, because when you compress a book down to 10 hours, you can still kind of tell a book. It's much harder to compress a book down to 2 hours, which is why books tend not to do extremely well as a single movie. With some obvious counter examples, there's obviously some books that have made great movies, but by and large, it doesn't work as well. Novella length stories make great movies. That's like the perfect
movies or novellas. And it's interesting too, because like the really amazing movies, the really amazing adaptations of books tend to be from books that are kind of actually crappy.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff you can cut.
Have you read The Godfather? It's not a great book. It's an amazing movie.
Yeah.
I hated the actual novel Silence of the Lambs. I probably shouldn't say that in public, but the amazing movie on a book I did not enjoy.
Yeah, I felt the same way about LA Confidential, actually, which I liked the movie a lot. Went and read the book, and I was like, "What the heck?"
James Ellroy, you're in for an unpleasant day, no matter what you do. Even at his kindest, he's traumatizing.
Yeah,
you got to be in the mood for it. Got to be in the mood for Ellroy.
Absolutely. I'm wondering, let's see, I think we don't have a whole lot of time left, and I'm wondering if there's any other questions. Is there a question that you wish somebody had asked?
Oh dear. How can we give you more money? I don't know. I don't know. You got anything, Ty?
No.
No,
I mean,
it probably wasn't.
On the kind of closing comments thing, though, we're in the middle of this thing that's kind of amazing, where we're doing this book tour, this virtual book tour, for the final book of a 9-book, a decade-long project. 10 days before the beginning of the last season of the show that's based on it, and which is kind of an amazing moment to be in. And I just want to really thank all of the independent bookstores that are hosting us in these things, and that have supported us up through this, and kind of helped make this a project that worked.
And Powell's is my hometown bookstore, because I was actually born in Portland, Oregon. I've lived there quite a lot. I actually live right across the river from Portland right now. So it's cool whenever I get to do a Powell's thing, because that was always the hometown store. And my wife and I used to live not too far from Powell's, and we would go there quite a lot and just hang out in a bookstore back when we were allowed to do that, before, hanging out at a bookstore might cause you to die. But we used to hang out in there a lot, and so it's cool whenever I can do a Powell's thing.
Well, thank you all so much. Oh yeah, go ahead. You guys can, if you have continue.
No,
if you have last thing.
I was just introducing you, man. That's all.
Thank you.
The devil, and here comes
Well, yeah. So I appreciate. Yeah, we appreciate those words for Powell's and for independent bookstores everywhere. All that kind of stuff. That's awesome. So, and we hope to have you all in our stores again soon at some point. And,
that would be great
for everyone. So that's it would be a true joy. So. But in the meantime, thank you, Daniel and Ty and so much for joining us this evening, and also everyone out there who tuned into this event and got a book and all that. And if you want other books and other information, go to get stuff at powells.com and check out our future events on there. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you at another event, online, or hopefully in the future live. So
awesome.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you for coming to hang out with us.
Really good seeing you again. I hope we can do it again, like in person someday.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you everyone so much.
Next time you're through St. Louis. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Night.